What is going on, everybody? It's your man R0B back at it again with another New York Giants video. In today's video, we're going to kind of be going over a little bit of the Joe Schoen press conference that happened yesterday, my takes from it, and just kind of, really talk about, where the Giants are so far, halfway through the season, going into the bye, and what I might expect, going forward for the rest of the season. First and foremost, if you guys are new to the channel, be sure to go ahead and smash that like button. It does help the videos get noticed. Smash that subscribe button. Turn on those bell notifications so that you guys don't miss another upload. So without further ado, we're going to go dive right into it. So, yesterday Joe Schoen had his press conference, and for me, it was very informative. I was one person that was, kind of both ways when it came to the trade deadline. I was not opposed to bringing in somebody, preferably at the wide receiver position. Although if they did steadfast, then I was okay with that as well. And it appears, and obviously that is exactly what Joe Schoen did. Now they went ahead. He did say that they were actively looking, rightfully so. To try to go ahead and beef up the roster. Now, Joe Schoen has made this very adamant. He wants to build, compete today and build for tomorrow. And I do feel that if he was able to go ahead and get a deal that he felt was fair compensation and that was not overpaying for a player, he would have done that. And obviously, they couldn't come to an agreement. He even hinted that some of them, really weren't able to budge, and the compensation that they were looking for just didn't really make sense. And things of that nature, and even hinted to, players as far as, I believe he even alluded to like money situations. So to me, that was alluding to Brandon Cooks, that maybe they were in heavy talks with the Houston Texans on potentially trading for Brandon Cooks, and they were not willing to budge on the contract or at least eat up some of that money. And obviously the rest is history. Now, in the press conference, he did mention things like he wanted to sit down with a few players this week that are potentially extendable. And for me, and to my knowledge, I mean, those would be Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley, Dexter Lawrence, Adoree Jackson, and Julian Love. Those five players are the only real ones that they could look at to potentially extending. Now, obviously, you can extend like your one-year guys, but those are your cornerstone pieces that you're probably going to sit down and talk to halfway through the season. Now, he said he wants to get that done because he doesn't want it to be a distraction during the rest of the season. So that's something that I can definitely see happening. Now, we all love Sexy Dexy, so more than likely he will be back. It wouldn't surprise me if we saw multiple extensions throughout this halfway point of the year, but one in particular that I'm taking a look at is going to be Saquon Barkley. Now, there was a team that contacted the New York Giants, just one, and probably a very good player, and was more than likely Saquon Barkley, and seeing, was he available for their services? And he said it was a hard no. Now, a lot of people are saying that this was Buffalo that called in, and the way that he explained it, I don't think that he would have explained it in a manner where it was a hard no. I think that had Buffalo had called, he would have said, yeah, a team had called and inquired about one of our players, and it just wasn't something that we were looking to do. We weren't looking to move the player. But he said, yeah, somebody contacted about a good player, and it was a hard no. Like, I don't think that's like the story within inside the story. I don't think that he would describe the Buffalo Bills where he came from in that manner. So me personally, I think Miami contacted us in regarding to Saquon Barkley and was his services available for potential trade, and they probably weren't offering, good enough compensation. And Joe Schoen just said, no, well, we're not trading him. And even if we were, that's not what I'm looking for. But to keep in mind, Saquon Barkley was one of the people that he said he would probably like to sit down with, and potentially talk about an extension, see where they're at. Now, he said that he wants to get these done by Monday. So that's going to be going into the week preparation for the Houston Texans game. And I would assume, that's what he said. He would want to get it done, before that, because he wouldn't want it to be a distraction as they're getting prepared for the rest of the season. I think if we do see a Saquon Barkley extension, they're doing it for a couple of reasons. One, obviously, they value him as a player, and they want to keep him around and extend him, and he's part of their future plans. But two, I think it's to give them a little bit more leverage when it comes to Daniel Jones. Now, when it comes down to the season, Daniel Jones has done some great things. He's really been one of the most efficient, quarterbacks in the National Football League. He's not turning the football over. He's an elite game manager, is really what he's doing right now. He's not turning the ball over. He's dinking and dunking. He's taking what the defense is giving him. He's being very, very efficient so far this year. Now, is that somebody that they're probably banging down the door to try to give, a 5-6 year, $200 million contract to? No. But is it good enough to the point where they can consider potentially maybe bringing him back for a year, rebuilding and addressing some of the other glaring holes that this offense has, i.e. interior line, wide receiver, corner, interior linebacker, and make the quarterback the last thing that you're going to address? Now, normally that's not what you typically do, but typically people that are addressing the quarterback position at the jump have a major, major, major issue at the quarterback position. And I would say that we have an issue at the quarterback position, but it's not a major issue at the quarterback position. If you can get some good quality, efficient game management out of Daniel Jones to the point where maybe you might be able to keep in some games, play good defense. He's not going to turn the football over, and you could potentially go ahead and give him a weapon here or there, and then go and get your quarterback next year. That's something that they could potentially do. When I say next year, I mean in 2024. So I think that they want to try to have that franchise tag at their disposal to potentially franchise tag Daniel Jones if they feel that he's worth that. If not, then you know what? They sign Saquon Barkley. They have him to a long-term contract. And that deal, I would say that 4 years, $55 million, 40 guaranteed would be somewhat fair. It's probably somewhere in between like the 10 to 15 range. As far as from a monthly, not monthly, from a yearly perspective. And I feel that that's a lot, more than enough. And I feel that also with a lot of the endorsements that he would have being in New York, it would make up for a lot of it as well. So I think that they want to have that franchise tag option available for Daniel Jones and not leave anything up to chance, that if he does show them something to the point where they make a run, they go to the postseason, maybe he wins a game, that maybe it's, it would say, okay, let's bring him back. Let's get him a wide receiver in the offseason or through the draft. Let's beef up this roster a little bit, and then let's assess him and see what he's able to do with a little bit of weapons. So, Daniel Jones does have some inconsistencies and things that he needs to, overcome. I think he hesitates a lot when he tries to throw. He doesn't want to take the big shot, and that could be a couple of different things. One, maybe because he can't. Two, maybe because he's nervous to do it. And three, because maybe he just doesn't trust the wide receivers that we have to go ahead and make that play. And if you turn the football over, we don't have a roster that could go ahead and compete and throw up 30 points offensively and score at will. We just don't have that. So, and I think he knows that. Now, maybe I'm giving him too much credit, and I probably am, but I think he knows that, and I think he doesn't want to turn the football over. And I think that the coaching staff says, listen, you don't need to try to do amazing, crazy things. We don't have, that talented of a roster where we can go blow for blow with people. So listen, manage the game. Don't turn the football over. Be smart with the football. We'll dink and dunk. And listen, if you need to throw it away or take a sack or run and don't get a first down, we'll live to fight another day. We'll get him on the next play or the next drive. And I think that that's probably what they're saying to him and what they're implementing to him. And that's not a knock on him, but I think they're just trying to play smart with the roster that they have in place. Brian Daboll doesn't have a Gabe Davis and a Stephon Diggs and a Dawson Knox to go ahead and utilize. And he doesn't obviously have Josh Allen. So, he's not going to go ahead and throw, and they don't have a Patrick Mahomes, a McCole Hardman, a Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce. So they're not going to run a Kansas City style offense, but they'll wrinkle in some things. But I think that they're just trying to do what they can with the players that they have, and with the personnel that they have. So I think that would be something to keep an eye on. If you do see Saquon Barkley go ahead and get signed to an extension, I think that that's strictly, like I said, to bring him back. They want to lock him in. They value him. He's a leader. They want to bring him back. But also it's because they want to keep their options open with Daniel Jones, that if he does go ahead and perform, that they can go ahead and slap that tag on him, bring him back for another year. Now, if Saquon Barkley come Monday does not get signed, now that doesn't mean that if he's not signed by Monday, he's not going to get signed. But for me, I look at that as kind of being a little bit of a lesser chance of him getting an extension and more like, Saquon Barkley getting the franchise tag, which at that point would result to me that they're going to be looking to go ahead and get a quarterback in this year's draft. And the couple of guys that I'm looking at, my main guy that I'm looking at, coming out of college is going to be Will Levis. He's probably my favorite college quarterback that's coming out. And out of all of the other quarterbacks, I'm not going to lie, I wasn't very high on him before, but watching some tape and looking what he's able to do in the very minimal amount of starts, Anthony Richardson is another amazing and shocking prospect with the talent that he showed at the quarterback position with the least amount of time playing the position, or starts, not playing the position, but starting. There's definitely some upside there. He is big. I thought he was skinnier than what he was. He's actually pretty good size. He's pretty thick. He's got a little bit of power to him. He's got some speed to him. Obviously, he's very young. I think he's like 22, 23 years old, so he's extremely young. But obviously, the downside with that that it is a project, so you're going to have to work with him. So is it to the point where they go ahead and they, let Tyrod start the year off? Have a guy like Anthony Richardson, they bring him in, they work with him, they work on him, they let Tyrod teach him. You give Tyrod the reins, and and after a couple of games, where Tyrod gets injured, which he is known to do, Anthony Richardson comes in, and then it's over at that point, and now Anthony Richardson is at the helm. From the Will Levis standpoint, I think Will Levis checks a lot of the boxes. When you go and you listen to a lot of the broadcasters and the people that analyze college football, the way that they talk about him being a leader in the locker room, a leader on the field, the way he carries himself, the way he elevates everybody else, the way, people, try to, the way he elevates everybody else's game, that's someone, of a leader. And there are many interviews that he's had, one in particular, which was a YouTube video, which I liked, which was, Will Levis, the Will Levis story. Just how humble he is and how driven he is and how competitive he is. But he does it in a humbling way. Kind of reminds me a lot of, Joe Schoen and when he was recruiting Josh Allen. They said that when they recruited Josh Allen, there was a video that Peter Schrager posted out yesterday on Twitter, which basically, Joe Schoen said that when they recruited Josh Allen, they recruited his personality. They recruited the person, not necessarily the player. I'm not saying that they didn't view his attributes and what he was able to do, but in sitting down and having conversations with him, they liked this personality, and that's what really, drew them to him. And I feel like Will Levis kind of checks those boxes. But Anthony Richardson is also a nice prospect from where he comes out. He's very humble as well, wants to be the best, and he's got some great abilities as well. So they could go with I personally think that when it comes, the most pro-ready quarterback or, out of this draft, I feel like that it's probably going to be, from a mechanic standpoint, from a leadership standpoint, somebody that you could start day one. I would say it's Will Levis is probably the safest pick right now coming out of Kentucky. But from an athletic standpoint, from an ability standpoint, from an upside standpoint, Anthony Richardson is probably that number two guy. I know C.J. Stroud. You've got Hooker coming out. Of Tennessee, and he's doing some really nice things these last few weeks. But when you look at all of the quarterbacks, even Bryce Young, the knock on Bryce Young is that he's a little bit on the smaller side and his body frame is not that big. And C.J. Stroud, great prospect, great player, always keeps his eye downfield, makes a lot of plays, but he does have a lot of talent. I've always operated under the vow is not vow, but under the assumption that I just don't trust quarterbacks coming from a college that produces a lot of quarterbacks. I mean, when you look at the history of the quarterbacks that have came out of Florida, Tim Tebow, Chris Leak, Anthony Richardson now, there's not a very good track record there. Even when you look at Ohio State and Alabama, I mean, look at Alabama. A.J. McCarron, Tua Tagovailoa, Jalen Hurts was there, but then he transferred to Oklahoma. There's a lot of quarterbacks, Mac Jones, so a lot of quarterbacks that have come out that really haven't taken off. They really haven't taken off, really. Now, I'm not saying that that's going to be Bryce Young because every player is different, but the track record is what I'm looking for. If you have a guy that you're working with and he's late every day to work and you're going to expect him to be late every day. Like if he's late every day and he's coming in late, if he shows up on time and it's an anomaly, but you expect that person to show up late every day when they've always shown up late. So it's the same thing with the schools. I don't expect the schools to continue to produce these top tier quarterbacks when they've missed. And teams have taken a chance on these quarterbacks and they just have not produced a good quarterback. Now, right now, the only positive Ohio State quarterback that I can think of that's performing is Justin Fields. And, we'll see how that goes. He's in his second year in the National Football League. So I'm not going to jump to conclusions and say he's the best one to come out of Ohio State. But even Ohio State, maybe not number one guys, but Terrell Pryor came out, Torrey Smith came out, obviously Justin Fields is out, and now you're talking about C.J. Stroud, may he rest in peace, Dwayne Haskins, and a lot of those players just did not work out. So not saying that that's what it means for C.J. Stroud, I just don't feel like it's worth the risk. I like the schools that don't really produce a lot of quarterbacks on a regular basis. The last quarterback to come out of Kentucky was Tim Couch back in the 90s. So they're not producing quarterbacks all the time. Texas Tech, the last big quarterback to come out of Texas Tech was Patrick Mahomes. Oregon's had two. They had Marcus Mariota and obviously Justin Herbert, but there's really not a lot of quarterbacks that have come out, at a lot of these schools. And the thing, too, with these other major schools like Alabama, Ohio State, Florida, they do get a lot of recruits at a lot of other positions, where these smaller schools, they don't really get a lot of top recruits. So if you have somebody that's performing well and doing well with really no top recruits, that are going to that school, it gives you a little bit more of an upside, so saying like, hey, look what this kid is doing with not a lot of top recruiting guys. I mean, I don't know anybody on Kentucky other than maybe an offensive line or maybe a defender as far as from the wide receiver position. That's a real top recruit that's there, or number one in the NCAA. So, so I think Anthony Richardson and Will Levis are probably my two quarterbacks that I would be looking at. And the reason why I would look at Anthony Richardson, like I said, is he's young. He's a developmental guy. You could, you have the time to go ahead and coach him up and get him the way you want him to play and get him the way that you want him to be. But for me, my main choice is going to be Will Levis, because I feel like he would fit right in and be the leader that we're looking for in New York, unless they decide to bring back Daniel Jones. Now, as far as where we're at, halfway through the season, I'm pleased. We're 6-2 going into the bye. I predicted us to have about 6 or 7 wins this season. So we're one win away from reaching that mark with a light schedule coming up, minus the heavy divisional games. So we've got Detroit. After the Houston game next week, not this week but next week. So that's going to be interesting. Those are both 2 games that we should win. But I'm not going to go ahead and just not take them, not worry about the games or not take the Houston Texans or the Lions seriously. The Lions can put up some points, and Houston, they're fighting, so they're fighters, and they're the type that, if you give them an opportunity, they'll go ahead and they'll pounce on you, so I'm not taking these 2 next games lightly, but then obviously we get back into the major game on Thanksgiving, which is going to be, Dallas versus the New York Giants, and that is a very, very important game, and it's in Dallas. And that is a game that we definitely need to win. It's a must-win, in my opinion, especially being it being a divisional game. But I'm pleased with the way things were going. The offensive line was showing some signs of improvement. Obviously, we lost Evan Neal and Ben Bredesen, so hopefully we can get those guys back, maybe going into the Houston game, or a bare minimum going into the Detroit game. He also did say that he's hopeful for Kenny Golladay to return against Houston, and I think that's another thing too. I think they're going to try to get Kenny Golladay involved. He had an interview last week where he said, "Listen, I've never been a part of a 6-1 team. I want to get out there. I want to compete." And he really hasn't. He was in Detroit where they constantly were losing. So the fact that he's on a winning team right now, he wants to contribute, and he's going to have his opportunity to do that. And let's see what he makes of it and see what he does with his opportunities. as far as when it comes down to the remaining half of the season, look, we have to play the Eagles twice, we play the Cowboys once, and we play the Commanders twice as well. So we have 5 divisional matchups in this second half of the season, and it's going to be tough. Philadelphia is looking very, very good right now. Jalen Hurts is playing some great football, and they've got some great weapons and probably the most complete roster in the National Football League, or at least in the NFC. They're I watched the game against Pittsburgh, and they were scoring at will, and they were able to move the football. Now Pittsburgh is not a very good football team, but at the same point, you need to dominate the teams that you're better than, and that's what they did. So that's going to be tough. And if we struggled against DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, who are not at 100%, then if we're going up against 100% A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith, then I'm a little bit concerned. And obviously, Dallas Goedert is a lot better than Noah Fant. We'll see how that goes. It's definitely going to be a hard game. I'm hopeful that we could try to split with them, but realistically, I think that they're probably going to beat us both times, which I'm okay with if that happens. Obviously, I'm not hoping that happens, but once upon a time, the Dallas Cowboys back in 2007, they did beat us twice during the regular season, and we beat them in the postseason. I'm not saying we would meet them in the postseason, but if we did, I'm sure that they would be prepared after playing 2 games, and maybe that gives us the upper hand. But if I'm being realistic, I do see us potentially getting swept by Philadelphia. I could see us splitting with the Commanders and hopefully splitting with the Dallas Cowboys, that giving us 2 wins in the division. So I just want to make it to the playoffs and go from there, if we're able to do that. But we have some light schedules, and we end the year out with Houston, with Indianapolis, which they're looking like they're all over the place right now. So, and that was a game that I penciled in as a loss. So we'll see what happens. So far, I'm pleased with what I'm seeing. I think that the defense is fighting. I think the players have really responded to the coaching staff, and they really adopted and bought in to what Brian Daboll, Joe Shane, Kafka, and Wink, and the rest of the coaching staff are trying to go ahead and do here. Do we have a finished product? Do we have a Super Bowl caliber team? No. But I will say that we are trending in the right direction. And the fact that you can win and while rebuilding is astounding. Now, yes, credit. If this was next year's schedule, it probably wouldn't. The record probably wouldn't look like this. But, and I said it at the beginning of the year, this is a great year to evaluate some of your players. This is a great year for your players to get used to your defense, to get used to your offense, because the schedule is light. So you're not going up against a lot of powerhouse teams. So this was a light year. So hopefully they can continue to improve, and going into next year, be ready to rock and roll. And we'll see what happens. Okay. But so far, I like it. I like what I'm seeing. Make sure that you guys are tuning in to the channel later on today. I'll be doing our Giants Talk podcast with me and my co-host PTA, that is Pesty Analyst. So be on the lookout for that. I appreciate you guys watching, and I thank you guys so much for the support. I hope to catch you guys in the next one. Go Giants, and we'll see you guys later on tonight. Go Big Blue. Take it easy, guys.